journey of inclusive research is absolutely marvellous. You have the campaigners in the late 80s, early 90s saying nothing about us without us. And up until that point, really, research into disability had been done on disabled people, you know, in really extreme ways in some cases, in the way that we do research on rats and mice. They were used as objects in research. And the pushback that nothing about us without us looks at how do we do research that is more respectful of people, or how do we do research for them, how do we do research with them? And then you get another shift on in the movement and they go, okay, how do we do research by them? And when you are considering somebody who has a physical disability, for example, if you're somebody who uses a wheelchair and the research is about some aspect of your life, the how do you do that research is a practical problem. Like, we make sure that you've got access to the spaces in which you need to occupy in order to do that research, but there's nothing intellectually about you that is going to prevent you from taking part in research. For people with intellectual disabilities, the progress has been different, and there has been a big emphasis on teaching people with intellectual disabilities how to do research, because research is understood as a fundamentally intellectual process, and so you need to learn how to do it. And there's been just brilliant studies where they've been able to support people with intellectual disabilities to understand the processes of research. They've put in support like breaking things down into smaller stages of learning, putting in symbols, putting in pictures, you know, everything that we know to do within special education to support learning and understanding. And they've been able to create scaffolding within which people with intellectual disabilities can carry out research. And then people questioned, well, why are we doing this? Like, are we just doing this to seem nice, to be good, or is this actually good research? And so people look at whether inclusive research is just nice or whether it's good research. And the phrase is the added value of inclusive research. There's lovely work where they show, so one of the examples is a study in which they are interviewing people who used to live in the long stay institutions, and you've got intellectually disabled researchers interviewing people, and you have cognitively able researchers interviewing people, and the intellectually disabled researchers do better because the people confide in them more readily, and also because they have previously shared that experience, and this is the benefit of lived experience in research. They're able to ask kind of insider questions that wouldn't have occurred to the cognitively more able researchers. And so you get this effect that is the added value of inclusive research. And as funding bodies begin to recognise how important this is, not only to be being respectful of the disabled community, but also in terms of the quality of research produced, they start to mandate that research be inclusive in order to receive funding, which is great. Start out, you would want that. The trouble is, they then start to say, here's a definition of what inclusive research is. And within the definitions are things that require a degree of cognitive capacity. So, for example, the researcher must understand the question being asked. And that's fine if the researcher is somebody who has a moderate intellectual impairment, even a severe intellectual impairment, but with a lot of support can be enabled to understand that question. But what if it is somebody with a profound intellectual impairment who is not going to be able to understand a question, an abstract thing? Does that mean that they can't be included in research? And certainly with guidelines that specify a requirement for intellectual capacity within inclusive research, a space is created in which the people with the most profound levels of intellectual disability are once again being excluded, marginalised and made vulnerable.